Hey there, this is Ross Izzard, and this is the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, where we talk about fly fishing in really interesting places everywhere, all over the world. Today is a little bit different. We're having a guest interview with somebody who brings a different perspective to the idea of backcountry fly fishing, and really more of a worldwide perspective generally to what it means to get out there and use fly fishing as a reason, or maybe as an excuse, depending on how you want to think about it, to get out there and explore not just the wilderness here in the U.S. or in your home state or out, your backyard, so to speak, but all over the world for species that have nothing to do with trout. Maybe for trout, right? You can go to Patagonia or Canada. I mean, there's lots of places to fish for trout. But what about other freshwater species like pike or saltwater species like tarpon or permit or bonefish? There is just so much incredible stuff to see on this planet. And so many incredible fish to catch and to chase on a fly rod that it feels wrong to not talk a little bit about some of those opportunities. So, whether you've ever been out of the country, whether you're just a hardcore trout guy, I mean, me too, I raise my hand. I fish for other stuff sometimes, but I'm about 95% of the time I'm fishing for trout. I wanted to take some time to talk about other stuff and other opportunities. And so to that end, our guest today is Chris Hunt. He is a managing partner at Hatch Adventure Travel, which is an adventure travel company, as the name would imply, that is attached to and affiliated with Hatch Magazine, which a whole bunch of you have probably read online before, including likely some articles that Chris has written. We'll talk a little bit more about this on the podcast, but I got connected with Chris through my own exploration into a bush plane and float plane trip up to British Columbia later this summer that I'm super duper excited about. And Chris and his team at Hatch Adventure Travel are the folks who helped me put that thing together and are helping me kind of do all the stuff that goes into getting on a tiny plane and flying around in the Northern Rockies to go catch some trout, maybe some pike if I'm lucky. So he's a super fascinating guy. He's been fishing for literally a lifetime, has been all over the world, caught all sorts of fish, and is just, in addition to being an incredibly down-to-earth, easy-to-talk-to guy, he's also just this incredibly experienced angler who has a totally different perspective on what it means to go to these really special places and catch these fish. Because we all know, the fish are part of it. I mean, I love catching fish, and so do you, right? Put them in the nets, great. But it's not just about the fish. And it might not even be primarily about the fish in some cases. It's about the places where we go catch the fish. And you can do that in the backcountry here in the U.S., but you can also do it in a whole bunch of crazy places that I bet you've never even thought about. And that's what we're going to talk to Chris about today. So buckle up. I think you're going to find it really interesting. If you are so inclined and you want to get out there and start exploring this crazy space rock that we all inhabit, you should absolutely do that. And even if you don't, I think it's an interesting conversation that could open your mind to some of the possibilities that are in front of you when you've got a fly rod in your hand. So with all that, let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so our guest today is Chris Hunt. Chris is a managing partner with Hatch Travel. I actually met him because he was helping me book a somewhat crazy float plane trip in British Columbia later this summer, which I'm super excited about. And as it happens, in talking to him, found out that he has been around the block a couple times when it comes to fly fishing. I think he's actually in Montana right now as we record this, checking out a new lodge. And he's got a couple things to say about traveling and fly fishing and mixing those two crazy things together. So, Chris, thanks for hopping on with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. All right. Well, why don't we start with this? I think probably a lot of folks who listen to the podcast have heard of Hatch Magazine. I know I read your articles all the time. I'm not sure they've heard of Hatch Adventure Travel. And I wonder if maybe you could talk a little bit about the connection between the two and which roles they fill.
Yeah, that's a good question. Hatch Magazine is a digital online publication that's been around for, about 15 years. And I've been affiliated with it for almost as long as that. Hatch Adventure Travel came about because my two business partners, Chad Schmuckler, who's the editor of the magazine, and Earl Harper, who's an outstanding photographer based in Seattle, we were all on a trip together to the Tongass National Forest in Alaska about, 13 or 14 years ago. At the time, I was putting together the trip for a nonprofit, and we were trying to focus in on the challenges facing the tongus and the salmon and the trout and the char of the national forest up there. And I invited a bunch of folks from the media to come up, and hopefully, they could use their voices to share the information about the tongus. Well, the three of us met, and we've been friends ever since. We started traveling more together over the years. We went to places like Mexico and Patagonia, all over the the Caribbean, the Bahamas. We fished together for years, and at some point we decided, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we sharing this experience with people, both via the magazine, the writing end of it, and then of course having them, giving them the opportunity to come along on these adventures. So we started almost 4 years ago, not quite 4 years ago, Hatch Adventure Travel. It may not have been the smartest move to start a travel company at the end of a global pandemic, but it turned out to be a good thing. And we have moved, from maybe a dozen destination partners our first year to almost closing in on 50 this year. And we represent lodges, camps. We do tours all over the world, from the boat company tour in Alaska, which is a small boat cruise that has a fishing element to it, to hardcore fly fishing destinations like the River of Dreams base camp in Chile, which is in the middle of nowhere on a remote river, one of the most remote rivers in Chile, and it is some of the best fishing I've ever experienced, to sort of a fishing cultural experience in Slovenia, to a safari in Namibia, to Atlantic salmon lodges in Iceland and Labrador, pike lodges in Canada. Here in Montana, we focus obviously on trout. We are all over the world now, and we're sending clients to these places, and they're experiencing the reasons that we're so passionate that we wanted to start a travel company in the first place. So it's been really good, and the magazine kind of works hand in hand with the travel company. When we go to a lodge, like I was just at a place on the Bighorn River in southern Montana. Fantastic lodge. They have been duck hunting and waterfowl hunting for years from this lodge. And over the last few years, they've essentially stopped their fishing program. And now they're restarting with a handful of great guides and an outfitter who's excellent at what they do. And it's one of the few places on the Bighorn where you'll be able to find room to fish this year. So that's kind of how it works. We'll write a story about our experience on the river, and then we'll craft a website for that lodge on the Hatch Adventure Travel site, and we'll start selling this experience. And it's a cool experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually how I found you. Is I read an article. This is a weird story, and I won't tell the whole thing because it would be boring. But I had a completely unrelated trip to Vancouver that was a maybe for me. And because I'm an addict, I was like, well, maybe I can fly fish while I'm up there. And I started looking around. I ran across one of your articles through that process. And then, bada bing, bada boom, I'm a whole lot poorer and going to British Columbia to fly around in a float plane. So whatever marketing strategy you guys are working, you got me bad, man. You left the barb in that hook.
Well, you're in for a treat, Ross. That experience is amazing. Earl and I did it last August, and it's based on a lodge, an adventure lodge that's basically on the Alaska Highway. So theoretically you could drive to the Northern Rockies Adventures Lodge. It would be a long drive on the Alcan, but you could get there. But from the home base where you're going to be staying, you'll fly 6 days all over the Northern Rockies region through some of the other the other mountain ranges that separate the Arctic from the Pacific, and the fishing is phenomenal. We had some of the best rainbow trout fishing I've had in years. Great Arctic grayling, northern pike, lake trout, bull trout were very cool up there. And it's, that's the nice thing about this lodge is it's something a little bit different every day. And then the flights out, these towering Northern Rocky Mountains, and you're in either a caravan or a de Havilland otter, and you're flying between these mountains and landing on these lakes. It's just spectacular. And for the price, I mean, I realize that you think you're a whole lot poorer, but it's half of what you would have paid to go to someplace like in Bristol Bay, Alaska, which is another wonderful trip, but it is just more and more expensive these days.
No, it's very reasonably priced. So I make the joke. But you're right. It's very reasonably priced, and I'm super excited about it. I guess I'm interested in how your network works. So you're in Montana checking out a lodge right now. It sounds like you sort of have these affiliates who come under your umbrella there at Hatch Adventure Travel. So do they come to you and then you go meet them and vet them and sort of pull them into the club, so to speak? Is that how it works?
That's probably the most common way. When you have a travel company and you look at our competition, we're very small compared to some of the larger companies out there that have been doing this for 20 or 30 years. What we have come to realize is that there are experiences that are underrepresented by the larger, more corporate travel umbrella. So often we'll get a phone call. That's what happened here. Jeremy DeVries at River Rock Outfitters in outside of Hardin, Montana, called me up. And he goes, we're restarting a fishing program. We have a lodge that has room for 12 people. Here's our website. Here's our rate. We want to be listed as a destination partner at Hatch Adventure Travel. So it's a process. We can't just take your word for it. We're going to come and check it out because we don't send our clients anywhere we haven't been ourselves. And that sounds self-serving, but truth be told, we've been on a few fishing adventures that have not been something that we think we could sell. So we are a little, we're very discerning. Our clients expect, an experience that is unmatched, or at least, something they can't find in a certain price point. And they want to have something special. They want to be able to do something special, stay in a great place. I keep using the word experience, and that's what we do, is really sell that experience. So I just, I'm only like 5 or 6 hours away from Hardin, where I live, generally speaking, in Idaho Falls. So I got in the car. Earl hopped on a plane from Seattle. We met in Billings, and we went out and spent 4 nights at the lodge, fished the river for 3 days with 3 different guides. We went through, we kind of put the lodge through its paces to make sure that it would meet our clients' expectations. And I'm happy to report that it will. It will be one of our destination partners within hopefully just a few weeks. So that's kind of how it works.
I mean, as far as a job goes, it doesn't sound terrible. You get to go out, fish with them, check it out. And now how many partners did you say you have?
We're coming up on 50.
Man, so they're all over the world, and you've gotten to go and actually fish with all 50 of them. That's not bad.
At least one of the 3 of us has been to all of them. I haven't been to Mongolia yet, and I really want to, but I haven't been yet. I haven't been to Greenland or Slovenia, but I've been to Iceland, and I've been to Patagonia, and I've been to Belize and Honduras and Cuba. These are things that we sort of on an availability basis, and 2 years ago I would have said this is just a really fun side hustle. Now it really is a full-time gig, and all 3 of us are putting in the hours. I think that's what happens when you start a business, especially in the climate where we started it. Right after COVID was almost done, things started to slowly improve, and you start paying attention to weird stuff. You like what's happening now with the tariffs and the politics and all of that jazz. That has a real world impact on our lives now, where, years ago when we had more corporate jobs, it was just sort of a tertiary event that was happening in the wings that might have an impact down the road. And now you really pay attention. So, it is a great job, and it is a job. It does take a lot of work, and it's not all fishing and checking out lodges. It's itineraries and accounting and all of that fun stuff too. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm a business owner myself. Speaking of politics, my business is actually government relations. So I spend my life, my day job is living in the politics that you're talking about.
Oh,
And then fishing is my escape. But slowly over time, those two circles in the Venn diagram are increasingly overlapping. So we're not going to do politics today, but at some point we're going to have to talk about it because they're not separable in some ways these days, unfortunately.
so true.
So I hear you. Well, so before you started doing Hatch Adventure Travel, you were still kind of fly fishing your face off and writing about it. I mean, you've got, I don't know how many articles you've written, but I'm guessing hundreds. You've been writing for Hatch forever. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you got into the sport and that whole side of your career journey.
So I've been fishing since I was a kid. I had two grandfathers on both sides. My mom's dad and my dad's dad were both anglers. My mom or my dad really didn't do much of that, but my grandfathers would take me and my cousins and brothers out, and we learned at a very young age in the mountains of Colorado how to fly fish and how to, we did it for years and years. And for me, it stuck. For my brothers and cousins, it's still kind of there, but not like it is with me or has been with me. And I went to college in Western Colorado and got an English degree. And I've been writing either as a journalist or, an author or magazine, generally a magazine author, magazine journalist for the last, we're coming up on 30 some years now of having been a writer, and the numbers of articles that are in magazines and newspapers and websites, it's in the tens of thousands by now. It's what I do. It's always been what I've done. I spent a lot of time working in the nonprofit sector, trying to work on behalf of public lands, particularly in the West. It was a worthwhile exercise to, kind of get a feel for the places that really matter, especially to anglers. And if you like to fish on public lands, we're one of the few places in the world that is blessed with an abundance of those places that you don't have to ask permission. You just have to go. Do whatever you want. So I worked on those issues for a long time. And then 4 years ago, we parted ways and I started this travel company with Chad and Earl. And it's just been a different whirlwind, same speed, same manic, pace. But again, using my journalism skills and my writing skills you find new applications for what you do at every turn. So.
Yeah, and I think it's worth highlighting what you said there about public lands. I think a lot of people who haven't traveled a bunch, or even if they have traveled a bunch, but they haven't spent time fishing anywhere else, don't know that, right? I mean, it's like if you try to go fish in the UK, for instance, I was putting together a trip to the UK about a year ago, or even Iceland, or pick a destination wherever you want to go. The way that the U.S. is structured with these vast swaths of public lands where I get to go hike and camp and do backcountry fly fishing and knock myself out in peace, it's not really like that in the rest of the world. And I think that kind of shocks people sometimes, but like everybody owns a piece of the river and you got to talk to that guy and that guy and that guy. And it is a very unique and a pretty special thing that I feel that a lot of anglers they just don't know. And so I'm glad you hit that point because it's super important.
Absolutely. We're very lucky to have what we have.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned earlier Mongolia. And this is kind of a selfish question. So I'm turning 40 in about a year, and I'm trying to find a really cool trip to take. And catching some taimen in Mongolia is real high on that list. So I might be back to throw some more money at you here in the near future. But what I think is cool about what you guys do is that it's not all about trout. So this trip to BC obviously is going to be a trout fishing trip primarily. But there is some good pike water up there. You were talking about saltwater earlier. We're talking about taimen in Mongolia. And I wonder if you could just chat a little bit about the species that you've chased, but then also sort of how this adventure travel thing ties in the species that are way outside the realm of the ones we're chasing as trout bums.
Sure. That, and I think you're a lot like a lot of our clients, especially in the U.S., where trout is sort of the penultimate game fish for the fly angler. And listen, I get it. I mean, living in eastern Idaho with all the public lands around and lots of great trout fishing on the South Fork and the Henry's Fork and just across the border in Wyoming or Montana, where I am now. Great trout fishing. And I don't ever mean to disrespect trout. But when you try saltwater fishing for the first time and you hook your first bonefish or your first permit, or your first tarpon or your first barracuda or triggerfish, whatever it is that you hook the first time, you will notice one thing, and that is that these fish are much stronger. You are not in control, and you're not used to that kind of speed and power pumping through a fly rod. It is a totally different ballgame. There are other species out there that I think are just as charismatic as trout. We mentioned northern pike, and we sell a fantastic trip. The one you're going on is a good example. With our northern pike, we sell another one up to the Yukon, which is a family-owned lodge in the southern Yukon, where pike are really a big part of the program. And pike are mean, nasty, toothy predators. All they do is eat, and they will savage your gear if you're not prepared for it. Now, the long-term effect, like a pike, catching a pike, the best part is the first 45 seconds. The attack, the hit, the first run, it's good. They don't last as long as trout do. But there are all kinds of fish you can chase the world over that are not trout. And Atlantic salmon is an excellent option for somebody who wants to see what real power looks like right out of the ocean. The same with silver salmon, where you're getting giant, 8 to 20 pound fish fresh off the salt. And when they hit a fly, it's a totally different ballgame than you get even from a 22 or 24 inch brown or rainbow that you might catch in a big Western tailwater that's, offers great fishing and excellent opportunity, but it's a totally different ballgame. And when you hook and land your first permit, you really can hear the angel music, behind you as it comes in, and you've joined this very unique fraternity, this very special fraternity. Like 1 in 100 anglers has caught a permit. I've been fishing for permit for 15 years, and I've caught 5 of them. I can remember each one, but I can also remember every time a permit has come up on a fly, kind of combed up on it, and is getting all, and then they just, for no reason at all, they just go away. There are great stories about permit, and it's one of those fish that if you can catch one, you really have earned your stripes. But there are all kinds. Literally, there are lots of fish in the sea, and it's not all about saltwater. We're working on future trips to the Zambezi River Basin in Africa for tigerfish. Obviously, we're focusing in on some work in Central and South America for peacock bass and arapaima and some other fish. We have in the past booked trips to Russia. That's probably not in the cards in the near future because of what's happening again on the world stage. But those, the big rainbows and the big Dolly Varden on the Kamchatka side of Russia are fantastic. New Zealand has great trout, but there's also great saltwater fishing in New Zealand. The same with Australia. Amazing trout water in Tasmania and southern Australia, but really good saltwater fishing for, cool stuff up in the tropical north. The world is a great big place, and I haven't seen it all. I've seen a lot, but I haven't seen it all, and I'm hoping that I can, over the years, I'll be able to see more and catch more and different fish on a fly. But, you don't, and this goes against any solid business decision I would ever make, but you don't have to go on a multi-$1,000 trip to a lodge somewhere in the middle of nowhere to experience something different. If you live in the U.S., you've got great fishing for all kinds of weird stuff, and most fish in the U.S. will hit a fly. Look at carp. I fish for carp one or 2 months out of the year in eastern Idaho, and I'll be honest, if I had to pick between fishing for carp or fishing for trout with a fly rod, I'd pick carp in a minute. They're stronger, they're smarter, they're tougher to catch, they are unbelievably hardy fish. In the Southeast, you've got your bass and your panfish, but in the swampy parts of the Southeast, you've got a fish called a bowfin, which is an air breather that's kind of loosely related to a gar, which is another cool fish you can catch on a fly. And bowfin are, highly predatory, very surly, sometimes difficult to catch, and they fight like a bass and a tarpon had a baby. It's, you don't have to book a giant trip to go and fish something new. Now that said, there are options that, we and other travel companies offer that will get you out there to experience something totally different. Um, and I just want to throw one thing in there before we move on. When you travel the world to fish, if you're just going fishing, you're missing half of the experience. Um, when we send someone to, say, Patagonia, for instance, to one of our three lodges in Chile, if you're just going down to go fishing, you'll have a great time. You'll catch big trout and you'll have a wonderful time. But if you're not, part of going to a fishing lodge is the camaraderie you get with other anglers, with the people who live in that community. Dive into the culture a little bit and experience the way the people live where you're going you're going to pull a fish around by its face for a while. But, next time you go to Mexico to catch bonefish, stop in the little town of Ixcalac and see what life is like on the Caribbean on the Yucatan. It's, if you're just going fishing, you're gonna miss half the fun.
Yeah, I mean, you hit a couple of big things there that I think are worth digging in on. The first one is that trout are not the be all and end all. And listen, I love trout fishing. Most of what we talk about here obviously is trout fishing. That's probably how I spend 90% of my fishing time. But man, some of the other fish are, to your point, I think even more fun to chase, even freshwater fish. So I have a long-standing obsession and love affair with northern pike. I absolutely adore those fish. Like you said, they're like sharks, and they're mean, and they try to bite you, and they're huge. And you get to tie these disgusting streamers that are like, a foot long and have sparkly hair. I mean, they're ridiculous. And I go out, we'll actually have an episode on this later this season. Once runoff starts, I'm usually out on a kayak in the very few places where you can catch decent northerns here in Colorado, chasing pike around because it's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
And to be honest, if I lived somewhere where I could chase them more often, I would be tempted to do that more often than I go after the trout because they're just they're apex predators, and it's cool to feel that.
Yeah, they are very cool.
I haven't done a lot of saltwater. Tarpon are pretty high on my list. Permit are high on my list. But I think, number one, there's more species out there. But the other thing is, I think the unifying thread for the folks who listen to this show is that we're going out there and doing this, not necessarily for the fish, but for the places, right? I mean, you can go catch an 8-inch brook trout right off the side of the highway, right? Or like a 12-inch rainbow down the road. Mm-hmm. And so some people think you're crazy. They're like, well, why would you hike 15 miles into the mountains so that you can catch the same 8-inch brook trout? And it's because you're missing the point. It's about the place that you got to go to catch the fish. And I think sometimes expanding your horizon beyond the hiking trails into, there's this whole world out there. It might be saltwater and exploring a village in Mexico. It might be checking out the steppes in Mongolia. It might be checking out Africa. That's all incredible experience stuff that's all based around these places that not a lot of people have seen. A lot of them are pretty remote, and all of them are memories that you get to keep forever on top of fishing for some awesome species. So I really like what you said there. And as much as I love hiking around in Colorado, the idea of getting out and scoping out these places all over the world is a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to doing, I hope, more of that here in the coming years.
Yeah, it's definitely worth getting out and exploring. And you're right about one thing. And I'll say this about trout. If you're fishing for trout, chances are the wallpaper is pretty good. You're looking around, you're going to be in the mountains somewhere, or at least someplace where you've got some topography and something to look at. Where I was this week, it was all about this beautiful cottonwood forest, big, striking bluffs. And I swear, if you pheasant hunters out there, if you've not been to southern Montana around Hardin, I've never seen more pheasants in my life. It was crazy. It was South Dakota crazy. So, but keep that in mind. But if you're fishing for trout, the wallpaper is going to be good, regardless of whether you're in Colorado hiking up a tiny little trail on the backside of Tin Cup Pass, or if you're in Patagonia fishing the Rio Mogote, and getting ready to walk over to the shore lunch they provide, which is an asado where they have the lamb over the open flames, and it's the experience is the best part. Fishing is always fun. If you're an angler and you like to fish, whenever you're fishing, you're probably going to be having fun. But look around a little bit and take in the places you are, the people you're with, the conversations you've had. Learn a little Spanish. Learn a little learn a little French, whatever. It's cool. It's worth doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate the reference to that little trail on the backside of Tin Cup Pass. I think we might have been on some of the same trails at some point. So I appreciate that. Yeah, and there's something to be said about getting out of your comfort zone to go check out these places, right? And some of that happens when you're hiking up a mountain to a high alpine lake, or you're in the middle of nowhere backpacking. I mean, you get that here, obviously, in Colorado or all over the U.S., and especially the Western U.S. But I think a lot of people, they get kind of stuck on the idea of the adventure travel thing. And I think some of it's because it can be complicated. You got to get yourself to another country, and then maybe you don't speak the language and you don't know who to call. And like we talked about earlier, it doesn't work like here. So you can't just show up on the river. You got to have access and permits, and you might be staying at a lodge. And it can be kind of intimidating for a lot of folks. And I think it puts them off of the experience a little bit. So what would you say to somebody who, maybe wants to get out for a couple of weeks, do something totally different, but they don't know where to start?
The first thing is, let someone else help you, whether it's me or one of my colleagues at another company. We can help you with this. It's not as hard as you think it is. And two, we really do all the heavy lifting. You basically have to show up. We'll give you everything you need to know, from the gear you need to bring to a customized itinerary to what you can expect at dinner time to the signature cocktail that this lodge offers with appetizers. If you are interested at all in traveling outside the U.S. or even within the U.S. to certain places, and you want a unique experience, don't let the fact that you haven't renewed your passport yet stop you. Go get your passport renewed. Go get a passport if you don't have one. But more importantly, there is a lot of professional help out there, and there are people like us who do this every day. We work with clients who have never traveled or who have barely fly fished. We know where to send people who need not just the fishing experience, but maybe the instruction. Most guides, and when you go to a fishing lodge, are very instructive, and they know how to help people, kick the bad habits and make the right cast. They'll help you with everything from flies to where to put the fly when the time comes. And there's never a time ever in my life where I've been on a guided fishing trip where I didn't come away from that trip a slightly better angler. And I've been fly fishing for, the better part of 5 decades. But every guide has a different technique. Every guide has, the secret fly pattern. Yesterday, our guide on the Bighorn, we were catching really nice trout. And he's convinced it was because of the special mix of dubbing that he uses in the sow bug pattern that he had on. And he may have been right. We caught fish all day and we had a great time, big fish. But again, that's because we were with a real pro, somebody who knew exactly what was happening on his river on that day at this particular time of year. And no matter where you go around the world, there's going to be that guide there who's going to be able to tell you, you need this bonefish fly. You need to put it 10 feet in front of the fish instead of 5 feet. You need to, you need to be able to double haul, and they'll help you learn how to do all of that stuff. There is, it sounds kitschy, but if you want to travel and you haven't done it, get some professional help. We can help. There are people out there who do what I do every day, and we can make the experience not just easier, but we can make it kind of fun.
Yeah, and I like the fact that, you can be a beginner or you can be an advanced angler. Sometimes I struggle a little bit with I fish my way and then I get stuck fishing my way. And it works, but it also, there's a lot of stuff out there that I don't know. And I'm sure that's true of anybody. And I haven't been fishing for 50 years, so I'm sure you could teach me a thing or two as well, Chris, if you wanted to. But, with all of this stuff, you don't have to be a great fisherman. Hell, I'm not a great fisherman, if we're being honest. I'm pretty middling most days.
Yeah, I'm not either.
That doesn't have to put you off. And you probably don't have a perfect cast, and maybe you don't know which fly it is, and maybe you're not all that great. You should just go anyway. Because if you're waiting for the day that you're the fly fishing god who walks on water and, catches 800 fish a day, it's probably not coming. Just go do it. Have fun.
Yeah. Nobody is, I've met very few anglers who are absolutely stellar at their craft. I've met really great casters who were not great anglers. They could cast a fly, 80 feet, but had no idea where to put it or how to read the water they were fishing. They were fishing over the fish. I've met anglers who, have an average to below average cast, but because they know the other things, they've been able to catch permit. None of us is perfect. I always like to say when people say, "Are you a good angler?" I said, I'm a real strong average. I'm real strong average, like a solid 6.5, and I think that's probably true for most fly fishers. You're going to find the occasional, headstrong guy who thinks that he is God's gift to, tailwater trout or whatever. And that's fine. But if you, when I was younger and we were debating, are we going to have kids or we're not going to have kids? And somebody once told me, well, if you wait until you can afford it, you'll never do it. Well, the same is true with fishing. If you wait until you're so good at fishing, you'll be done. You won't be able to do any of the things. And so go when you have the means and the desire to have an adventure, have an experience. And like I said, once you have a guide, you're going to be a better angler that day on that particular stretch of water. You're going to be using the right fly. You know where to cast. You're going to be in the exact right place at the right time. So you'll always learn something when you take a guided trip.
All right. So if you look over all of these different places that you've fished and all the different species, there's 2 questions here. What's your favorite trip that you've taken and why? And if you had to pick just one fish, if God said you get one more fish that you could chase for your last day on Earth, what species are you picking?
Oh man, that is so unfair. One trip, there are a lot of trips I haven't taken yet, so I really don't know. Like, I don't know what tiger fishing is like on the Zambezi, and I've never caught peacock bass. It's certainly on my list. I don't want to be redundant, but I love the boreal north. I love going way up into the scrubby black spruce and birch forests of Canada, and I like to drag gurglers and poppers over black water for big, mean northern pike. I love that. And I've said this before, if I could somehow figure out a way to, become an honorary Canadian, which is getting harder these days, I would totally fish for pike as often as I could. But here's the thing. Pike live in amazing places, and usually if they're not grayling there might be big brook trout there. Or if they're not brook trout, there might be big lake trout. Walleye are a good fly rod fish, believe it or not. Northern pike are one of my favorites. And if right now, and maybe it's because I have 2 trips coming up where pike are going to be on the menu, I'm getting a little excited. I've sat down at the vise a couple of times and I'm tying, 8-inch long. God, I don't even know what the names of these things are. They look like something the cat threw up, but pike are the perfect fly rod fish. They are mean, they're aggressive, they really aren't very discerning. They will eat damn near anything. I've caught them on, size 8 black woolly bugger that looks maybe like a leech that's in the water there naturally, to something that looks more like the skin of a gopher dragged across the lake, and watch the entire lake just sort of erupt underneath this fly. They're at the top of my list in terms of fish that I prefer to catch. Now, again, if I had to pick one trip that I would do consistently, that I would want to take consistently, I would go to Patagonia on the regular. It is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. The scenery is relentless. It's all around you. The trout, and you may not know this, but trout in Patagonia really don't belong there. They're not native there. They were introduced in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and sort of discovered in the 1930s and 40s, and then they kind of made a big deal out of it in the 60s. But the trout rivers in Chile and Argentina, people tell me, well, you should have been in Montana 50 years ago. I don't think Montana was this good 50 years ago. The Patagonia fly fishing for big browns, rainbows. There are some brook trout. Is, in my opinion, unparalleled. It is the ultimate cold water fishing experience in the world. And I would go again, not so much because the fishing is amazing, which it is, but because you dive into this really cool culture where you've got, the Chilean and Argentinian people are the kindest, most amazing people in the world. And they love the fact that we like to come down and experience their fishing. But their culture is special. Their culture is unique, and it's something that I would recommend everybody do. So that would be my favorite trip. So I kind of gave you I gave you a twofer there. So
No, I appreciate it. And I haven't fished for all the fish that you have, but pike they have a special place in my heart too. And a few years ago, just for fun, I tied up what I call the chicken fly, and it looks like a chicken. It's a ridiculous yellow, feathery, absurd thing with googly eyes, which I literally tied it as a joke. And just for fun, I went out and started throwing that thing around on the streamer rod, and sure enough, they'll eat it, man. They are good sports. If you're in the right place, I think the trick with pike, this is a whole different episode that we don't have to get into. Being in the right place at the right time is definitely a big part of that. But man, if you are, you could almost throw a bare hook in the water and they'll come up and eat that thing like a great white shark. And it doesn't get old. It really doesn't.
No, they're amazing. And, like you said, they are very willing. And in places like, the northern Saskatchewan, northern Manitoba, the Northwest Territories, the Yukon, even eastern Alaska, Southwest Alaska has some pike. They're tremendous opportunistic fish. And if you're an angler who, likes the violence associated with streamer fishing or popper or gurgler fishing, then pike are your new addiction.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to talk more about pike this season, but if you haven't tried it, you really should, because they are something else for sure. Being dragged around on a kayak by a 40-inch pike is it's up there in terms of my favorite experiences ever, for sure. Okay, so Chris, if folks wanted to learn more about Hatch Adventure Travel and the work that you do and the destinations that you offer, where would they go? And then also, if they want to read more of just your experiences, because you've got a ton of writing out there about some really cool stuff, where would they go for that?
Sure. So Hatch Adventure Travel is real simple to find online. It's hatch.travel. Just it's our name, with a period in between the two words. And you'll go online, you hit the destinations link, and you'll see probably 40 some lodges that you can take a look at, lodges, camps, destinations like for instance, our Namibia trip is not really a fishing trip, but it's a series of lodges that you go on a tour. The same with the boat company. That's a live aboard kind of vessel where you fish every day from the boat. But for the most part, they're lodges and camps, and you click on one, you'll read about about the destination, the fishing you'll be doing, the food you'll be eating, the people you'll be fishing with, the experience, the things to do other than fish. So it's a nice way to kind of get to know a place. Now, in terms of, I'm going to throw this in there because I think it's important. We always work ahead quite a bit at the travel company, and I think most travel folks who are in the fly fishing world do the same. Right now, we're really booking heavy for Patagonia next year. Their season winds down at the end of this year. We're working on things like spring break in the Caribbean next year, because that's starting to fill up. So if you want to do something in the next 6-8 months, we can make it work. But really, it's best for you to start about a year ahead when you start to plan travel. In terms of where you can find what I've been writing over the last several decades, I'm probably a fairly shameless Google search away if you were, Chris Hunt author, Chris Hunt journalist, whatever. But Hatch Magazine definitely has the largest library of the work I've done. I've also published a handful of books. I finished a book with Kirk Dieter a few years back. Kirk and I worked together for 10 years or so. And we've been great friends for, coming up on almost 20 years now. And Kirk wrote a book called The Little Black Book of Fly Fishing, and he wrote that with Charlie Myers, who is the late, great outdoor editor of the Denver Post. And I had Kirk and Charlie on a media tour in Wyoming like I said, about 20 years ago, maybe not quite 20 years ago, but close. And this was right as Charlie learned that he had cancer, and he and Kirk kind of ginned up the Red Book, which was sort of just a compilation of tips that they'd picked up over the years of fishing. Charlie passed. Kirk and I picked up the calling, so to speak, and we published the little black book of fly fishing, which came out 2 or 3 years ago. And it's just sort of, more fishing tips that we've picked up over the years. Like, for instance, I was fishing in the Bahamas with a guide who was convinced that bonefish don't like the smell of epoxy or resin or anything that any glue that you use to cement the materials to the hook. So what he does is he takes the fly and he just kind of runs it through the mud, and then he rinses it off, and suddenly it doesn't smell bad anymore. And for him, it works. So you throw that in. Here's a tip from, my buddy Mark in Long Island in the Bahamas, and lo and behold, it works. And the same is true for, say, peacock herl is a fly tying material that has just so many different applications, and it's the I don't want to say fluorescence, but it's just got so much character and this friend of mine who lives in Texas ties a lot with peacock herl, and he says I put it under a microscope and it's the same all the way, at certain levels of magnification. So I put that tip in the book, and they're just little things like that we've picked up over the years, not just from our own personal fishing, but from anglers who are real pros at this, guides, outfitters, other anglers. So that's the last one we did. And I'm sure there's another book in here somewhere. I just haven't figured out what it's going to be yet. But I've got, dozens and dozens, hundreds probably of magazine articles out there. I've been writing a long time. It's always been an outlet. The fact that I'm able to kind of help make a living doing it has always been very gratifying to me. And I appreciate anyone who, when they take the time to read something I've written, and then even more importantly, give me feedback on it. That's always nice. So.
That's awesome. And you've got some really good stuff. I went pretty far down the rabbit hole. You got some really good stuff going back a long ways, man. And it sounds like a lot of it's really good in this black book as well. Many peacocks have died in service to my fly tying escapades as well. It's awesome stuff.
Well, sometimes you just pick up the feather at the zoo. You're good. You didn't kill anything.
I tell myself that's how it happened, but I don't think that's how it happened. So, well, Chris, this has been so great. I'm really, really excited about this trip this summer. I'm excited about what you guys are doing. If you are looking to get out of the country or even in the country to go and do something just different this year or next year or whenever, give Chris a shout, because it really has been an incredibly easy experience for me. Way easier than I thought it would be. And now I'm going to Canada, so you should too.
You're going to have a blast. I'm a little jealous that I can't go with you. You're going to have a great time. It's truly an experience you'll never forget.
Cool. I just got to make sure I got the right video equipment to make sure I've got it documented somehow. But
there you go.
Yeah, that would be cool. So thanks for joining us, Chris. This has been great.
Thanks for having me, Ross. I appreciate it.
That'll do it for today. We've been talking to Chris Hunt with Hatch Adventure Travel. Chris is, as I said at the beginning, just a fascinating guy who's got more fly fishing experience than most of us could accumulate in 10 lifetimes. So a chance to talk to him about where he's been and what he likes and what he does for a living was a ton of fun for me. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope you've got your wheels spinning about some cool trips that you could take and some cool places that you can go to chase some fish on a fly rod. And I hope in the meantime, while you're noodling on those things, you're out there chasing those happy trout or bass or pike or whatever happens to be in your backyard with your fly rod in the meantime. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming along. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you back here real soon. Till next time, this is Ross. Maybe I'll see you out there. Unless you're on an airplane to Mongolia.